And welcome back, everybody, to the Podcaster Nation. I say welcome back because I know you were just listening to our stuff and you wanted more. So you came right back, and guess what? We have more for you. This is the podcast that is about podcasters, it's for podcasters, and it's done by podcasters. And today, our guest, you guessed it, our guest is a podcaster. Folks, this is the place where we come together to lift each other up. This is the place where podcasters come to tell their stories, to promote their podcasts. This is the place where the rising tide raises all ships. I'm glad you're here. If you are not a member of the Podcaster Nation on Facebook yet, why aren't you? All you have to do is have a podcast to get in. Apply today. All right, we'll get you in. I promise. I'll approve you myself. I promise. So here we go. We have an awesome guest today. This lady is full of energy. I don't know if I'm going to be able to keep up with her. I've been doing this all day. I'm a little long in the tooth. She's laughing because she knows she's already running circles around me. And folks, welcome to the show, the host of the Sisters in Service podcast, Air Force veteran, movement specialist, the wait for it, the freaking fabulous Kat Corchado. Kat, how you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me today.
Well, I'm very pleased you could be here, and I'm so sorry you had to sit through that really rough opening where I tripped over every word. That happens to podcasters.
I totally get it, but it was not rough at all. I'm just gonna say.
I appreciate it. Thanks for letting me out of the doghouse on that one. All right, so Kat, listen, I know that you've got a lot of stuff going on. You have a great story
Mhm.
and a fantastic podcast. You're very accomplished in this field. But before we get into all that, just tell everybody who is Kat Corchado, what are you about, and what brings you here today?
Oh, wait, how long is this podcast? Okay, I have to talk fast. Thank you so much for having me. Hello, everyone. Kat Corchado, I grew up in the military. My dad was already in service. And so I grew up as a military brat. I've been a military brat, I've been a military spouse and an active duty, and now a veteran. And I was always someone who played sports. I was always active, which I did in high school. And at some point in time after high school, I found myself as a single parent, not knowing what I was going to do because, it's one thing when you're hungry, but when your child's hungry, that's a totally different thing. So I
Yeah.
thought, I'm going to go into the military for 4 years. 4 years. That's, and you'll soon realize I can't count. Just to figure things out, to have a steady paycheck to come in, take care of my child, take a breath, a sigh. I ended up doing 20 years, and I'm glad that I did. And I got out of the military and found that I was kind of lost because transition for military veterans is difficult, but it's always different for each person depending on what they went through. And that's when I started the Sisters in Service podcast because I kept hearing women veterans having issues with transition. And then we started talking about military sexual trauma, and all these things were happening. And I thought they had fixed this whole transition thing. And so that's when I started my podcast. And it's called Sisters in Service because initially it was for women. And then I thought, well, wait a minute. When you're in the military, the whole family is in the military. And so I opened it up to military brats and military spouses, and yes, men too, and veteran service organizations. And so I've been doing the podcast for almost 4 years, and I started my business, Small Space Pilates, where it's geared towards women who are in midlife, who most of their kids are either close to graduating high school, going to college, or they're empty nesters. And it's that whole thing where you look in the mirror, you catch yourself looking in the mirror, and you go, "Who the heck is that person staring back at me?" And I thought this might be something that women would really gear to because the commute's great. You just go into a room, you put your comfy clothes on, and you do a live workout with me. And so that brings us up to date.
Wow. I mean, you never know what you're going to get from somebody, right? When you say, "What are you about? What brings you here?" I mean, you just unpacked a lot. That single mom,
Yes,
power to you because
thank
wow,
you.
just wow. That had to be something. If you don't mind me asking,
Mhm.
you entered the military as a single mom.
I did.
I don't think that's anything I've like heard before. Now, I'm sure it's happened, but I just
Mhm.
haven't heard that story. What sort of obstacles, difficulties does that present, or was the military actually accommodating for that sort of situation?
I'm glad you asked that question because there's actually a story behind that. So I came in on delayed enlistment, which means I signed the paperwork in November 1979. I didn't go active duty till March of 1980. As far as I know, the Air Force was the only one that had stopped January 1980 of any people getting in who were single parents. You could still get in, but you have to do a whole lot of other things now. And so I remember filling out the paperwork, and some paperwork said, "Do you have a dependent?" And I said, "Yes." And my training instructor called me in and he said, "How did you get in as a single parent?" And I said, "I don't know. Y'all let me in."
That's not a question for you.
That's But they checked it and it was all legit. But the problem was that other single parents were, how can I say that, not holding up their end of the bargain, meaning they were always absent from work. Their kid was always sick. And don't get me wrong, your kid does get sick. It happens.
Yeah.
But they totally expected me to be a washout. So I had to prove myself as a single parent and prove myself as someone who could do the job and take care of my child and all the things that come with being in the military. And that was rather difficult, but I had great supervisors who would help me out. They would call the following base I was going to. They'd say, "Hey, I have someone for you. She's a single parent." And then you see the eye roll. You didn't see it on the phone, but you could almost hear the eye roll. And they
Hmm.
say, "No, no, no, she's good." And so they helped me out a lot by doing that. But yeah, money was a big deal being a single parent. I mean, I remember after paying everything, I would have a $10 bill. Now, hold on, this was before direct deposit, okay? And I would fold it up and put it in my wallet. And I would hold it there for incidentals, like we needed more milk or more bread or whatever. But that was really hard. And that's when I started my fitness career while I was in the military trying to make extra money. So I needed a part-time job without part-time hours. And I just, it just kind of blossomed from there.
Okay, again, wow, because now you're unpacking even more. I mean, every time I ask a question, we end up going down like five more levels, and I'm going, wait a minute. So you're a single parent to start with. You enlist in the military. You go through all that rigmarole. You're in. You're proving yourself, but the pay is such that you're. And yes, this was before direct deposit. I mean, you and I both remember life before all of the automation happened.
Yes.
So you actually had cash, from a bank type of thing.
Mhm.
But so you're not only doing all that while you're being a single mom, you're also running a side hustle before everybody was running a side hustle.
Yes.
So back then, was that sort of frowned upon, like you're doing this? Because like right now, everybody has a side hustle of something, and
Right.
so it's very acceptable. But back then, that was almost a revolutionary act to be running a side hustle like that.
Well, when I talked to my supervisor about it, as long as it doesn't interfere with the job, so I had to be on the job from 7:30 to 4:30. I would start teaching classes around 5:30. So that gave me time to go home, change, go to the club, do some personal training, teach a couple classes, and be home in time for dinner with my son.
I see. All right. So they
Mhm.
were actually cool about it. They were like, because a
Yes.
lot of places were not back in the day.
No. If it interferes with the mission, no. They would have said absolutely not. But
Got it.
because I could and I had the leeway to be able to do that, they were fine with it.
And was this before internet too?
Oh
That's
yes.
what I thought. Yeah.
Oh
Then
yeah.
just
It was just starting to be a thing, the internet. Okay. Because I was a communications project manager, which means that if there was any kind of communications needed in a building or anything like that, I was the one that I didn't buy it for them, but I would commission for it to say this organization needs this. And that's basically where I learned a lot about computers. Because we had the Dell contract way back in the Dell in the way and
Oh,
back in
wow.
the day when Dell was a big deal.
Yeah.
So that's that story.
Oh my goodness. That's funny too. The reason I brought that up is because, you and I have both, been around the block a couple of times.
Mhm.
The people who are not pre-internet folks just can't fathom the fact that there wasn't internet back then. So when you talk about running a side business, you're not just sitting at home online or doing it on
No,
your phone, which also didn't exist. You're literally going to the club, talking to people in person, working another whole job.
absolutely.
Wow, plus the military. I
Plus the
don't think I've
military.
ever heard that from anybody.
I'm a first, folks.
You are. I deal with veterans every day, and I've never heard anybody go through this. So, okay, explains a lot. Let me just tell you from what I've heard on your podcast and
Mhm.
whatnot. So, this is what brings you to doing the podcast and starting your business. Um, Tell everybody what the podcast is about. What it's constructed of. What's your topic?
Mhm.
What's your goal?
My goal initially, and it still is, but it's kind of fanned out a little bit, was to give women veterans, a safe platform to talk about whatever it was they wanted to talk about. So there are certain things that happen in the military that are pretty sensitive. Like I had mentioned, military sexual trauma. Sometimes there's rape, sometimes there's other things. Maybe they got treated badly while they were in the military, which happens. So I wanted to give them this platform to say, you know, this is a safe place to be. I can talk about this and get their story out because my job as a podcast host is to be able to have someone tell their story. And if it helps one person, then I'm good with that. And that's always been my goal is for someone to say, wow, she went through that and came through the other side. Maybe I can too. And then I started opening up to, military spouses, military brats, because we all have a story. And it's very conversational. And I want the story to be told, whether it's by a woman, a military brat, a military spouse, active duty military, or even, a veteran. Veteran service organizations that I feel do a really good job at helping veterans because let me just say there are some out there that say they do their job well and they really don't. And that's really sad.
Ouch. I've heard that before about
Mhm.
certain places that I'm not going to name, but yeah, we're both nodding our heads. I would bet if we
Yes.
were off air, we'd be, agreeing. I've heard a lot of that. So, um, how, man, creating a safe place for women who have been through this. First of all, it has to take a lot out of you to be the person who's being there. I mean, I would imagine that emotionally that's taxing. Uh, Maybe you can speak to that, but also, um, are women willing to do that? Because I know the fear of persecution is just outrageous.
Yes, they are, to answer your question. They are willing. A lot of times, if it's a sensitive subject and, I'll say, let's meet one-on-one, let's meet just face to face to get them comfortable and to tell them a little bit more about the podcast and just to hear what they have to say. And I'll say, if you feel uncomfortable after that, I totally understand. But most of the time, in fact, all of the time, they go, let's do this. Let's do this. And I'm so glad that they do tell their story. It's not taxing in the way you would think, but it just made me think, it makes me think even more about what's happening to our troops now. What's happening to our female veterans? Who's protecting, or not our veterans, but our active duty women? How are they being protected? Who's protecting them? What kind of precautions are in place for women, when they're in the military? Because not, and I can only speak Air Force. I can't speak Army or any of the other branches, but they all seem to, what's the word I'm looking for? They all seem to treat it differently. I know that the Army is like, you're a soldier, deal with it. And the Air Force is a little more lenient in the fact that, okay, let's hear your story, what happened. But it's just amazing to me the stories that come out from these women when they're talking. And I sit back like, whoa. And you're still here talking about that. And I have to give them kudos for saying what they're saying, for telling their story, because it can't be easy to relive all of that. But I think that's why I wanted this safe platform to not be judgmental, to hear what they have to say. From, a lot of times I'm asking questions and they're my questions. I'm like, well, what happened to this? And how come this? But I want them to be a little more about coming forward with, well, I didn't get this help. And here's why, or this happened. Like there was one story that I didn't even know existed of a woman that I can't remember what branch of service she was in, but I wanted, no, I'm not going to guess. Anyway, she was allowed to come in the military. She wasn't a citizen yet, and they promised her that they would do the paperwork for her to be a citizen. She gets out of the military. That never happens. She gets stopped for a traffic ticket, and she has to go back to whatever country she came from. They automatically just said bye, and she's stuck. She's been in the United States for since she was born. And so it's those kinds of stories. When I heard that story, I
Wow.
was taken aback. I was just like, you've got to be kidding me. So it's those kinds of stories that I get to learn things. I get to learn more about what's happening to our troops, and not only just the women, but the men too in today's society. Because when I was in, things were a lot different. Now it's different and not necessarily better.
Wow. I mean, some of this stuff from someone who's not in the military,
Mhm.
and I can only come at it from a male standpoint because that's what I am. It just seems like the stuff you're talking about, like it shouldn't be going on because that almost seems like Dark Ages stuff. And the reaction, like my feeling, of course, is going, really? That's going on today? I mean, that seems like it's so archaic. And you're nodding your
Mhm.
head going, yeah, it's still happening
It's
today.
still happening. I mean, I felt the same way when I found out about it. I was like, wait, what? What did you just say?
Yeah,
And yeah, it's archaic, you're right. It's from the dark ages, you're right. But I think we have to start to understand that men and women are different. They're all soldiers. We're all soldiers, but that certain things happen to women that I won't say won't happen to men because it has. But women are less likely to be able to protect themselves. They don't have the strength to help themselves, whereas a man does for the most part.
interesting. Well, I mean, thank you for sharing that. That's part of what you do on your show.
Yes.
Is this? No, I know it's not all you do on your show. I heard you had a
Mhm.
doctor on there, and I listened to an episode that told me I need to quit sitting because of sitting disease, which really upset me. I have to be honest. I came on here with like feeling very distraught. I was listening to that episode right before I got on with you, and I'm going, I have to change my whole setup. This is just not okay. How am I going to do this? But you
Exactly.
cover a lot of different topics. So give
Yes.
everybody an example, maybe some examples of some of the other topics that you cover and other angles you take.
Oh, sure. I had a veteran who was an entertainer. I've had one who was a comedian. I had a woman who was transgender that she was on. I actually did a podcast. It was called Sisters in Service Down Under, where I had three women from Australia, and they were all veterans. And we talked about the differences between their service and our service. And actually, there is no difference. They got treated just like we did back in the day. I've had doctors on. I've had, just people who have a sense of talking about midlife. So a lot of things that I talk about now or have guests on, they're talking about women and the things women go through. Just because we're veterans, we're still women. So we're going to go through the menopause and the perimenopause. We're going to go through the sitting because we're doing all this podcasting and other things. We're looking in the mirror and saying, what just happened? Why do I look the way I look? Because in my brain, I'm 25. The mirror says I'm something else. So I try to cover as many different subjects as possible. And something that I feel would be interesting to me that maybe other veterans might be able to garner from the conversation.
I love that. Yeah, because you do. You've got a lot of different aspects going
Mhm.
on, which I think is one of the reasons why you've been around as long as you have, and as
Thank
successful
you.
as you've been. Because you're definitely, you have a little bit of breadth to the podcast there, which is neat.
Mhm.
Um, and great. Now you're still running the business that you started before. I assume that
Yes.
has sort of morphed a little bit, right? That's the small space
Small
Pilates.
space Pilates. Yes. So thank you for asking about that.
Yeah.
It's a platform. So it came about from a woman I was helping. We were doing a virtual workout, and she lived in, I want to call it a fifth wheel. I think I'm like, she had the trailer. She was in a trailer that, they hauled but with their truck. And so I asked her, I said, send me video. And we were able to set up a workout for her. And I was able to tell her what to, not what to do, but give her advice on different exercises. And she eventually became my business coach. And she said, there are a lot of women out there that don't know how to work out at home. They don't want to go to a gym because they feel as if they don't know what's going on. They don't want to, no one wants to appear stupid and be like, oh, I want to work that machine, but I don't know. And they don't want to ask anybody. And I get that. But what I love about the platform that I have provided is that it's a way to work out with weights. We do stretching, we do some Pilates, but it's a safe place to be, meaning there's a no perfection policy, which, okay, for those of you listening, the no perfection policy is more for me than anybody else. Because think about it, when you see a fitness person and they're on the beach, they've got perfect hair, and nothing against these people. That's their thing. That's not me. They've got the perfect conversation. They don't stumble over their words. They don't fall. They can do a retake. Okay, you're going to hear me complain. You're going to hear me talk about stuff that I don't like. I hate working biceps. They suck, but I do them anyway. Um, I had, it's a place where you don't have to be perfect. You can wear your comfy clothes. The commute is amazing because you go from one room to another. And we work out for a specified amount of time. Now, what I mean by that is we work out as long as the workout lasts. It could be 20 minutes, could be 30 minutes, could be 11 minutes, could be 50 minutes, depending on what's going on. And what I try to do is tell people, don't get stuck in it's got to be 30 minutes or it's got to be an hour. Start thinking, how hard, I've got 8 minutes. How hard can I work out for 8 minutes? Because the hardest workout I ever did was a body, like no weights. It was body weight training. I worked out for 15 minutes. Squats, push ups, lunges, push ups, rest for a minute, rinse and repeat. And it was hard. So when people say they don't have time, I'm going to challenge them a little bit. I'm going to challenge them.
I just think it's a shame that you're not passionate about this at all. I mean, really,
I know,
it's
right?
it's I could feel it coming off you from over here. It's like just and I mean, who
Mhm.
hates biceps for crying out loud? That's like the
Oh,
easiest thing to
yeah.
train.
No,
Oh,
it makes my stomach hurt to think about it.
hate it, huh? Wow, look at that.
Well, the thing I want people to understand is my true belief is that everyone has the right to feel good in their body. You have the right to do that. But we have gotten so used to feeling not good in our body that we tend to think that is normal.
Hmm.
So if you have arthritis or so you're used to hurting all the time, and then you say, oh, now you want me to exercise? But it's the one thing I love about the platform is that I always show modifications for whomever is in the class. So if we're doing push-ups, you might just do a plank. You might just do a plank on your knees. You might do a push-up against the wall. I show all of those modifications so that everyone feels included.
Nice. Sounds like a neat program.
Thank you.
All
I
right.
think it's so.
This is all right. Small space Pilates, then that's
Yes.
because you were literally doing it in a small space.
In a small
You're not in a
space.
gym. That's
Yeah,
very
you
cool.
don't, a lot of people don't have gyms in their house. Well, you may have, I don't know. But you can find a space in an office or a room where you could set up your computer and work out. And that's what I want people to start doing is utilizing the space that they do have and doing something great with it.
That's cool. Um, if we bring the podcast back in, then everybody
Hmm.
uses their podcast a little differently. Obviously, your podcast stands on its own. It has its own message. It's got a purpose, serving women, women veterans, women in midlife, the whole nine
Hmm.
yards. In addition, it sounds like it's also a marketing piece for your business. Does it work out that way?
Absolutely. I mean, people hear the podcast and then they start to ask questions. Well, what is small space Pilates? I've never done Pilates. And small space Pilates just kind of rolls off the tongue, but I want people to understand that it's more than just that. But I think that if people aren't interested in the podcast, then they'll say, well, what is this small space Pilates thing? So it kind of goes hand in hand. If they're not interested in small space Pilates, they're usually interested in the podcast. If they're interested in the podcast, you see how it works back and
Absolutely.
forth.
That's cool. The
Mhm.
Small Space Pilates, is this a course or a program that they buy separately, or is this something that you coach them through?
It's something I coach them through. It's a community. I do 4 classes a week, so 12 classes a month. That's like $47. It ends up being way underrated as far as money, but my here's my goal. My goal isn't to get rich off of this. My goal is to help everyone feel good in their body and to get them to understand that fitness looks different on everybody. But they
Hmm.
get to work out with me. I'm doing the workout too with them and giving them tips along the way. If they have an issue with doing squats and their knees are hurting, I'll say, okay, I'll sit and watch them do the squat and say, okay, this is what you need to do. So I've been in the fitness industry for 40 years.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm
Congratulations
actually
on that
89.
too.
I look really good for my age, don't I?
Get out of here with this. People are going to believe that. Okay. I mean, not everybody's on video right now. Some people are listening to the audio and they're like, whoa, she's almost 90 years old.
Okay,
She's
I'm not
not. She's
89, you
kidding.
guys.
All right. But, I mean, I got a little credibility thing going on here. I mean,
Oh.
wow. Okay. Beautiful. I love the whole program. I mean, it's great the way you're putting all these things together. How do you promote your podcast then?
I usually do it on socials
Hmm.
and putting it out there for other people, other veterans to see. Maybe they're active duty, maybe they're other, and they see it and they hear what we're talking about. And then I have people say, hey, can I come on your show and talk about this? I'm like, let's talk about it. And what I love to do is actually do what I call a connection call. And if I don't know you, I'd say, hey, let's get on a call because you know this, being a podcaster, lots of people look great on paper. And then you get them on the microphone and they're giving you one word answers. So how did this go? Fine. How long have you been in business? 8 years. You're like, oh God.
Been there. Yep.
So
Yep.
I want to be able to see if they're able to carry on a conversation. And most of the time, I have to say that we do have a conversation and it works out really well.
That's great. Okay, so you're finding guests on social. You're building the
Hmm.
business on social and promoting the
Hmm.
podcast while also promoting the business. So the two are
Yes.
going hand in hand. Now, on socials, is there something, is the social the thing that works the best for you? And the part two of that question is, have you done any promotion that you think is just kind of useless?
Oh, good question. I think a lot of people, so many people are on socials, but I think what's important to remember is the socials do work for me. But I think what's important when anyone's in business and they're putting a social whatever, say you're doing a social media blitz, and we tend to want to come off as being perfect. So you ever see those socials and they're super pretty and it's and you're like, oh God, how come they're so good? And that's great, okay. But sometimes I'm the ABC 1 2 3 girl. I'm the person that has the typo. I'm the person that I have a video and the video's not running the way it's supposed to. But you know what? It shows that I'm a real person. Okay. Do I make mistakes? Sure. Do I make mistakes on socials? Absolutely. I try to go back and correct it. And I just want people to see that I am a person. I'm not perfect, but I think that we could still chat. We could still do business together. We could, still come into the community. You could still come on my podcast. So I think it's important to know what works for you. Socials work for me. Being out in public, talking to people works for me. As you can tell, I like to talk. So I have no fear of talking to strangers that I don't know. Any opportunity that I see that comes in my direction, and they'll say, "Oh, what do you do?" You know how you go to a networking event, those people that say all their things they want to say, and then they say, "Oh, here's my card," and then they turn around and leave, and you're like, "Well, don't you want to hear my thing?" Yeah. So I try to have notice the opportunities to be able to talk about my podcast, depending on what it is. The podcast might not be appropriate, but my platform for fitness might be. So I look for those opportunities when they present themselves, and I try to, you know, do what I need to do to get people to either talk about small space Pilates or talk about my podcast.
So no real dogs though, in terms of like something that you've tried and has just been sort of a waste of time.
Mm, No, no. I did say at one time, and you probably said this too, that I said, I'm never doing video, never doing video. And I'm so totally doing video right now. So never say never, folks.
You know, back when you and I were doing this though, like when we were starting, video wasn't just not automatic. There was
No.
actually a kind of a division. Like if you were a
Yes,
YouTuber, you weren't really a podcaster.
exactly.
In the years that have happened since
Mhm.
then, oh, now all of a sudden it's all kind of the same thing, right? And
Exactly.
everybody's both. And so in our defense, of course we said
Mhm.
that because it was something you could say.
Never
Now you
going
can't.
on video.
Can't say that now. It's all the same
I
thing. So
know.
yeah. I know what you mean though, about looking perfect and trying to, come off as perfect and everything
Mhm.
else. It's one of the reasons why I don't edit because I'm like, you know what? If you spill your drink or the cat crawls in your head or, there's a car honking its horn, look, it's life. This is what happens when we all get
Exactly.
together.
Like when I
So,
first started podcasting and I was trying to get all the ums and the ahs and I was killing myself editing. And someone said to me, "You're having a conversation, right?" And I said, "Yes." And they go, "When you're having a conversation one on one, do you edit the ums and the ahs and the?" And I was like, "Oh no, I don't.
right.
It's conversation." So
Yeah.
I leave it in there.
Yeah.
No
My
perfection policy.
good for you. I was just going to say that. Oh, that was beautiful. I love it. No perfection policy. That's just that.
Mhm.
Okay. I usually ask folks, about monetization. Now, in a way, you've
Mhm.
monetized the podcast because got your business, you're marketing your business through it.
Yes.
Have you taken other steps to monetize it in terms of, sponsors or ads or anything like that? Just out of curiosity.
I haven't yet. I do remember someone telling me that I should be, charging my guests and to come on the podcast. And I said, that just does not feel good to me. It doesn't even sound good. It sounds
Wow.
awful, doesn't it? And I said, no, I can't do that. I said, I have veterans on my show. I have military people on my show. They're already paying a huge debt to society as far as wearing the uniform. I'm not going to charge them to come on my podcast. That's ridiculous. And so monetization, through my podcast about small space Pilates, absolutely. Advertisers, if they wanted to, let's have a chat about it. Let's talk about it.
Nice.
And so, but I haven't really pursued a lot through that. But again, an opportunity hasn't come up yet. So we'll see what
Excellent.
happens
All right.
after this
Well, we're
podcast.
putting it out there then. Right on. We have had some people who have contacted some folks after hearing this podcast, and I'm not making any
Interesting.
promises. Have
I
nothing I have
understand.
anything to do with. I'm just saying. Yeah, because we have a lot of different people that listen to this. We have a very eclectic,
Mhm.
listenership, being all podcasters. We're from
That's
all walks of
amazing.
life.
Yes.
So, but I love what you're doing, and I love the way that you're doing it. Let me ask you my corny question, because I know you've been dying to
Mhm.
hear what this is,
I
right? And
am.
okay,
Ever since you mentioned it, I was like, is he going to tell me?
that's
And you
nope,
didn't.
nope. And when you hear it, you're going to be disappointed. You're like, this is what I waited for. But it is corny, but I get so many really great answers to it. So I make sure this is my Arnold Schwarzenegger, I'll be back moment, okay, in all my podcasts. In terms of doing your podcast, what is it about doing the podcast portion of what you do that you love the most? And what is it about doing it that you just really, for lack of a better word, hate, okay, strongly dislike the most?
What I love most is just talking to the people, the guests. I love that. I love the interaction we have. I love hearing people's stories. You find out things that are so amazing. And I'll give you an example. She sent me her bio, and I look at the bio and I'm looking for anomalies. I'm looking for the little things that you wouldn't necessarily pick up. And she said she skydives as a hobby. And I said, tell me why you jump out of perfectly good airplanes. And she looked shocked. She's like, you read that? I go, I absolutely did. So I love finding out little nuggets of information that I can put on my podcast and talk about it, bringing the human out. If you have a business coach and that I'm talking to, I want to try to bring the human out in them. Maybe they're a dog person or a pet person. Maybe they skydive. Maybe they rock climb, like real rock climbing, like stuff like that. So I find out that information. The one thing I hate about podcasting, I don't know. At one point, it was the editing, and I told you I don't edit anymore. But I think it's sometimes the expectation. People expect that podcast to come out on a certain day. And there are days, and this can relate to anything. There are days I just don't want a podcast. I don't want to sit down and I don't want to. I just don't. And you have to sit down and be effervescent and bubbly and everything. And sometimes it's not there, but sometimes you work through it. As a veteran, you're just like, hey, suck it up and let's keep it moving. And so that's what I do.
You just taught the master class on why I ask this question. Those were great. I love those answers. That was fantastic. It's like, well, you know what? It used to be the editing, but I don't do that anymore. I love it.
Hmm.
Absolutely. And good for you, by the way. I would
Thank
love
you.
for that to become a movement where we all
Yes.
just say, we're not perfect. We've had
Mm-mm.
enough. You don't expect me to be perfect. Why am I trying to produce a show that looks like it's produced by, ABC when
Exactly.
it's me in my, spare room
Mhm.
in my house? It's like, come on.
Yeah, and it's
So,
you and you're bringing out your personality and that's what people hear
yeah.
on the mic is you. And sometimes people listen for the guests, sometimes they listen for you.
Yeah.
So I think it's twofold, but I think it's both of those together.
All right. Well, we need to work together to make this a movement of
Hey, let's go.
no
Let's
more
do
editing.
it.
Just
No more editing.
done with editing. Absolutely fabulous. That's all right. So, as we kind of, bring things together here, sometimes I do this, sometimes I don't. So I'm going to surprise you a little bit here. And
Okay.
fair warning, because you're very sharp. So I'm sure you're going to handle this.
Thank you.
Um, I want to, first, I'm going to ask this. Then we're going to go back. First, before I get to the final little bit, what is one piece of advice you can give to folks? This is usually my last question, so that's why I'm a little messed up right now. But
Okay.
I'm looking forward to doing this with you. So, what's a really good piece of advice that you can give to podcasters, first of all, who are not where you are? They're not at that, 195, approaching 200 established framework. What's a good piece of advice you can give them?
Take it a step at a time. Just keep moving forward, finding your guests, doing your podcast. Because believe me, when I first started, and I would hear people who say, "Oh, I've got 200." And I was like, "Oh my God, I have four." But you know what? Your passion is going to pull you through. My two passions are veterans and fitness. I'm passionate about both. If you're not passionate about podcasting, you're going to go through what they call that pod fade. You're going to
Yeah.
do two episodes and just let it die off because let me tell you something, this is hard. And you're probably realizing that. Find ways to make it easier. Take it a step at a time, making your podcast better and better, up leveling, as my business coach says. And if you're passionate about it, that's going to carry you through. If you're not passionate about it, then I have questions.
Then good luck. Rich. That's great advice. I love it. We'll just mic drop it right there. All right. So this is what I'm doing. This is actually the last question now. On the surface, you have a fitness business. That's a side hustle, right? That you're turning into,
Mhm,
sounds like a much bigger deal. You're retired Air Force veteran.
mhm.
You talk to, female veterans. You're an advocate for them, and you have a podcast. So that's on the surface. In the short time we've talked, you have just tapped a lot of different wells, and Kat, there's a lot going on with you. So
Yes.
I want to do this to end, and I don't always do this, but I want to
Mhm.
give you the floor, okay, for the last couple minutes of the podcast here, and I want to throw this at you a little bit. Is there anything that I didn't ask you about that really needs to come out about, Kat, about her business, about her life, about anything that has to do with you and what you're doing? Is there something maybe we already touched on, but you want to make sure we drive home a little bit harder? Or
Mhm.
is there just maybe one other leave behind you want to leave with people? I mean, something like that. Okay. I'm expanding the question and giving you a second to think about it. But I want you to have the floor for the last couple of minutes and tell all of our listeners something that we don't know.
Something about me or just in general,
Whatever is floating through your
whatever.
head and your heart right now.
Well, I want listeners to understand that what you see is what you get. This is me. Now, I may not be your flavor, and I get it, you know, but this is who I am. What you hear, what you see is me. I am super passionate about fitness, and I think you've heard that through some of the questions that Rory, you have asked me. And I want people to know that I'm going to be doing a fitness challenge. Hold on, don't judge me yet. One of the things that people say all the time is what? I don't have time. Starting Monday, I believe is the 19th of May, I'm doing an 11-minute fitness challenge. No weights are required. Bring your bring your body, bring your enthusiasm. All it costs is your email. That's it. And you get to work out with us. We have a good time, but it's 11 minutes. 11 minutes. And I want to drive that home. I don't go past the 11. When it's over, it's over. We're going to do it for a whole week. So even if you miss a day, that's okay. But sign up and see what we do because I'm trying to start a movement of getting people to move. I don't care if you dance, okay? If you want to dance while we're working out, but you're moving. And so I don't know if you can hear the passion in my voice for this, but this is super important to me that people are healthy. Start taking charge of your own health. Do what you need to do to be healthy, not just for you, but for your family, for your grandkids, to be able to do those things that you want to do instead of saying, oh, I can't because I want to, but I can't. I want you to do all those things. I want the world to open up so that you can say, yes, I can climb that mountain if you want to. I can run that marathon if you want to.
Love that. Absolutely love it. Thank you for ending us up that way. What you see is what you get. And honestly, what we're getting is pretty freaking fabulous. So
Oh,
I'm
thank you.
really, really, I am just pleased as punch that you came on today. It's been an absolute pleasure meeting you and talking to you and putting your word out about what you do in your business and your podcast and your advocacy. And Kat, I cannot thank you enough for coming on and being as open and authentic as you are, and for talking to our audience today. Thanks for that.
Thank you for inviting me. It's been fun.
I'm really glad to hear that. That's my favorite compliment right there. It was fun. Awesome. All right, folks. The freaking fabulous Kat Corchado, movement specialist, Air Force veteran, uh, female veteran advocate, host of the Sisters in Service podcast, and owner of the Small Space Pilates business. Folks, this is the place where it's for podcasters, it's about podcasters, and it's done by podcasters. This is the place where we come together to lift each other up. And this is the place where we hear these fabulous stories. Folks, this is the place where the rising tide raises all ships. So keep sailing.